Nico Iamaleava, has he exceeded your expectations, Jimmy? First, I guess we would need you to tell us your preseason expectations, and then we can kind of take that next step.
No, he has not exceeded my expectations. I thought he'd be a really good quarterback. I don't think he's a great quarterback. I think he's a really good quarterback right now. He's had 2 turnovers in 2 different games, 2 against NC State, 2 against Oklahoma. Sometimes it's hard for me to blame a quarterback for a sack fumble. I would blame him if he holds the ball too long and gets sacked. But he didn't get much protection because I didn't think Tennessee's tackles played very well, Dane Davis in particular. But Lance Hurd was out, and then Campbell goes down. They were a mess at tackle. And I do think that led to some of the conservatism from Heupel's standpoint. But when I look at Nico's numbers, I think he's played well. I would give him a B+ so far. And I think as the season goes, he's going to get better. But he's played about like I thought he would so far.
Jimmy, how would you compare his trajectory to you guys covered the team, so I just want to throw it out. The narrative of the 98 team is that T. Martin, they really had to bring him along. He struggled early, and then he really got his rhythm going. I guess it was the Georgia game that year. Do you see a similar trajectory with Nico, just on a higher scale, because they're throwing it a lot more nowadays?
On a higher scale, yeah, because look, frankly, T. Martin, like when they beat Syracuse, he helped win that game with his legs. He had a 50 or 60-yard run late in that game to set up a field goal, right, to help win it. His passing numbers weren't impressive. Do you know what he did against Florida? Do you remember that?
It's like 84 yards, wasn't it?
7 of 20 for 64 yards. He didn't play well at all. And Tennessee relied on the defense and they relied on the running game. Nico's far ahead of where T. Martin was at this point, in my opinion. And then they brought T along slowly. T was never, I know that he completed 23 in a row against South Carolina, but he was never as consistently accurate as Nico is. And T was more likely to beat you running. And Nico's a good runner. I would take T as a runner over Nico at this point. But there's similarities, and I think they're bringing Nico along a little bit slowly, but not as slowly as Tennessee did with T. Martin. Tennessee protected T and used their defense until T finally hit a groove about, 4 or 5 games into that season.
Yeah, and I've always wondered, now this is T saying this as a player, but T. Martin believes he could have done more and was frustrated by the fact that they held the reins in on him. But that's a player talking. But I can tell you some other players thought the same thing. Jimmy, do you think T could have done more if they would have opened up the playbook a little bit? I mean, in retrospect, they did the right thing, so nobody's griping about it.
My hesitation is this. Tennessee saw what T was doing in practice. Now, and maybe Tennessee's persuaded by this. So I'll give you 2 examples. I remember they had a scrimmage in the spring, and the offense couldn't get a first down, and T was ineffective. Now, they had a great defense, but there was concern. So I recently talked to Randy Sanders, and he said, you talk about not getting a first down before in the spring. We had a scrimmage a week and a half before the season, and we couldn't get a first down. We were awful. And so I think they went in with, God, we have to be conservative because we're not playing well. Our offense isn't doing anything. T's struggling a little bit. So I think they went conservative. I don't know if they knew how good their defense was, but they could do nothing against their own defense. And so I think they felt like, God, the offense is really not very good. So I think that probably persuaded the coaching staff to be pretty conservative early in the season with T. Could they have thrown more with him? Maybe. Was he ready? I don't know. They should have a better idea than we do about was he ready based on what he's doing in practice. But in practice before the season, offense was doing nothing. And I think that's why Tennessee was conservative with T.
Shameless plug. Caleb, feel free to jump in there. But if you would like, you can purchase and celebrate 98, the untold stories behind Tennessee's 1998 championship that has that story in it as well. The book is available and some autographed copies by some former Vols. Sorry, Jimmy. All right, go ahead, Caleb.
Jimmy, so let's project for a minute because Tennessee's got a bye. They come back, they play Arkansas, they play Florida, kind of just the beginning of just a regular SEC schedule. Do you think coming out of the bye, Nico will start to look more and more like, and the offense will start to look more and more like the offense of 2022 as the season progresses? Or do you think what they've done the last and their 2 main Power 5 games is going to be the standard of how they win games this year?
No, I think you'll see more of the 2022 version. I think the Oklahoma game was more of an outlier. It was almost like the Texas A&M game a year ago when A&M was ineffective, the quarterback stunk, and Tennessee decided we don't need to do much on offense. We can win this game by playing ball control, time of possession. So, no, I think you'll see that. And by the way, when they go to Arkansas, Arkansas has the ability to score some points. They've got a really good running back, the transfer from Utah named Jackson. They got a pretty good quarterback in Taylor Green. He's prone to mistakes, but he's got a lot of ability. And, they got 640 yards against Oklahoma State on the road. So I think Tennessee will go back to being more open, throwing the football more, and trying to pile on points against Arkansas and future opponents than they did against Oklahoma.
Jimmy, do I sound like a Nico apologist when I say now? Certainly a strip sack from the blind side, that's tough to overcome as a quarterback, but ball security is something. And but am I being a Nico apologist when I say, well, the fumbles weren't really his fault? And now twice I have seen him play with a certain maturity, the Citrus Bowl, because I thought he didn't force things. Mm-hmm. And then he did force a pass to North Carolina State, which he's admitted to. And he didn't force anything, I didn't think, against Oklahoma. Do I sound like a Nico apologist there? Because he hasn't exceeded my expectations, but I thought he'd be a Heisman Trophy type of candidate anyway. So do I sound like I'm making excuses for him?
Well, I get the sack fumble deal because, again, my feeling is if you hold the ball too long and it's a sack fumble, I probably ought to go back and take a look at it again. Sometimes they're unavoidable. Now, I've seen Tom Brady and Peyton Manning fumble on sacks when they got clobbered and didn't have enough time to throw the football. I do not and did not think that Nico was a Heisman Trophy candidate this year. He may evolve into that, and I think maybe next year. I was actually shocked when I saw a recent poll that had him 4th in terms of odds to win the Heisman this year. I don't get that. He's not played nearly at that level, in my opinion. But I don't think he was that accurate against Oklahoma. He threw several errant passes in that game, which I also think concerned Hype a little bit. I still think he's evolving and maturing as a quarterback. He is not near the finished product we're going to see. So I think he is going to get better as the season goes on. The key is how well is he going to play when they take on Alabama and Georgia? That's a big key. And I think he's got the potential to play really well in those games. Tennessee, close to the vest against Oklahoma, didn't open it up as much, so he didn't get to see as much of his skill set. But I think as Tennessee goes on, they'll open it up. And to me, I may end up being wrong. From what I've seen, the only 2 teams I think that can beat Tennessee right now are Alabama and Georgia.
Yep, I agree. The poll question was Josh Heupel too conservative versus Oklahoma. Please vote on that now. I'll give you an update and then get to Caleb. As I remind you, portions of the program brought to you by Peak IV Hydration. South Knoxville and Sevierville. Now, they are closed today, but you can order at peakivhydration.com. If we can drop that in the chat. 100 5-star reviews. We're like, what are they going to come to my house and give me an IV? No. They have fantastic patches that replace all those vitamins and minerals that you may have lost from, I don't know, Jimmy, a long day on the golf course or a long night at a bar. So it'll do all that. And Caleb, maybe even a long night having to stay up with your 3-month-old. By the way, any super chats you want to throw in goes to Caleb's 3-month-old son Quincy's college fund, and I'm not allowing him to gamble it away. Caleb?
I could turn that money into so much more, guys.
No, that's how it starts. And the next thing you're at the craps table till 3 a.m.
So Jimmy, how concerned are you about the fact that, and I went back and watched some of that Oklahoma game. On some of the RPOs, am I alone, guy? And I'll ask both you guys, am I alone in thinking my one red flag with Nico is that I've noticed does it seem like he's making the wrong read a lot of times on the RPOs, on when to pull it and when to run it or hand it off?
Caleb, I've wondered the same thing, but I also wonder this. I do believe that a lot of those calls are predetermined. I think a lot of times when you looked at Joe Milton, you thought, why didn't he keep it? I think they predetermined, said you're handing it off. So I think sometimes they have the option to keep, and I think sometimes it's a predetermined, you're running the football. But I saw the same thing you saw. There were a number of times I thought, boy, if Nico kept the ball, he had a wide open area on the edge to run and gain some yards. So I'm hesitant to say he's misreading it because I don't know if it's a predetermined call. But I think they should have, if they are predetermined, I think they should have more options for a keep on that play, because there were a number of times he could have gained significant yardage against Oklahoma and he handed it off.
Okay, let me ask you both this question to make sure that we're all on the same page. So, Caleb, you predicted Nico would win the Heisman Trophy. Okay,
I did.
Okay, so
not this year.
Yes, this year.
No, I did this year. Yeah,
I thought his career. Okay, all right.
Yeah, so
I'm not going to win that one.
It would be tough to exceed those expectations, but has he exceeded or underwhelmed your expectations, Caleb? I guess that we'll set that up as the new poll question.
I can't put it on him because I didn't realize how bad Tennessee would be. I didn't know their tackles would get hurt, and I also didn't know they'd be this bad at tackle behind John Campbell and Lance Hurd. And I didn't know that they wouldn't need him as much in certain games. All those things combined, he's underwhelmed my expectations at this point. But guys, I'm going down with the ship. And Jimmy, Vegas knows something, because you're right. They're keeping Nico right now at the 4th best odds to win the Heisman, even with the underwhelming start. I could see maybe my mind is going to, not personality wise, but 2012 Johnny Manziel. I think you guys forget that Johnny Manziel wasn't that good the first month at Texas A&M. He was very much a late bloomer. And then out of the blue, October came and he goes off, and then he beats Alabama, who Nico still plays, and he goes and wins the Heisman. And that was his first year starting. There's a few others like that are late bloomers. And I'm thinking, okay, they got to buy. Nico's going to come back at Arkansas. And Jimmy, you said that they're going to start looking like the 2022 offense. So I'm sticking with my guns.
Jimmy, go ahead, Jimmy.
No, I was just going to say, Vegas doesn't always know something. Every week, they misfire on more than half of their projections on a point spread. Yeah. More than half the time. Just chart it. So all this stuff about, they always know something. Notre Dame was favored over Northern Illinois. Auburn was favored over Arkansas. I mean, it's every week they are way off on their projections. Georgia was favored by over 20 points against Kentucky. So I don't subscribe to Vegas knows something.
Yeah, and their goal is, let's face it, the line and these odds are pretty much a poll to make everything 50-50, so they make the juice. They make the 10%. But it has to be a projection on how you think the game is going to go, right? It's the same thing. You're trying to get 50-50 bets, so you're projecting how the game's going to go so that you're casting doubt on people about which side to go. Yes and no. I would say this. If Tennessee played, for instance, Northern Illinois, and Northern Illinois is pretty good, but I think there would be so many bets placed on Tennessee because it's a bigger fan base that it could move the line a little bit.
Well, and I'm not just talking about Tennessee.
Okay.
I'm talking about all games across college football, because I charted this for a number of years because I kept hearing this. And the first week I charted it, Vegas got it right, 12 out of 34. They were 12 and 22. The next week it was 15 and 28. So anyway, I don't want to get off on that too much, but I'm not a big fan of people saying Vegas always gets it right, because they don't. Anyway.
I agree. Jimmy, great stuff. We certainly appreciate it. Where all can we follow your work as you're, I guess, retired, but not really, kind of, sort of?
I've made a F in retirement, but you can find me on Off the Hook Sports. We're writing game day, game after recap columns, also with the podcast. We're doing podcasts where we're interviewing people that you can find on YouTube. Our most recent one is Randy Sanders. And we had Tommy Winton before that. We've had a number of Heath Schuler, Sterling Hinton. We've had a number of folks that we've interviewed. And we've had about 2 million views on YouTube so far. So we're building some momentum. We like where we are. My next target, I hadn't even called him yet. I'm trying to get Robert Peace. I think he'd be a good interview because he almost went to Arkansas. Arkansas was one of his finalists along with Tennessee and Texas. So that's where you can find us. And I've enjoyed doing these interviews. They're long form interviews, but it's been fun to catch up with some folks.
Nice. Thank you, Jimmy. I certainly appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, guys.